Last week, we launched all new toolfinder, but before we actually built it solely using no code productivity tools. We used the likes of Notion, Super and Tally to launch what we call and most people call a MVP, which allowed us to soar to the top of Product Hunt both for the day and week. And this was an awesome launch, but naturally I want to show you how we went about building that using all of these three tools. As somebody with no coding skills and experience, it was great to launch this and get it off to a basic start so we knew whether this would be something that we would evolve. And naturally, we have spent a lot of time developing, designing it into the all new toolfinder, with huge credit to Carl, who has been developing hard at this. So I'm excited to dive into Notion, Super and Tally and how we built toolfinder with just those tools. So to start this journey, I wanted to give you a bit of an idea behind the MVP concept. Now, I actually went to business school, surprisingly. I didn't listen, but the basic sort of concept behind it is to launch something in its like most basic format. And essentially the idea behind it is that once you launch it, it gives you an idea to whether there's any traction to whether the product can become valuable in the future. So once I launched this, I didn't necessarily want to pay to get this fully developed or a huge website backend just initially because, well, I didn't want to invest in that because I didn't know whether it would fly, the idea. And the good news is it did fly and has been flying since, which is great. But this is a really good example of how you can use Notion to get things rolling. So this is actually the site. It's actually on a different site at the moment, but I'll show you what it previously used to look like with Web Archive. But you can see here that it looks like a website to some extent because it has the structure of the site. And essentially, there are sort of three components to this. There's the Notion site here, which lives and breathes in Notion. And it's where all of the content library, the database of tools is. Then there's Super, which we'll come to in a moment, which basically sets up the front end. So Notion is the back end, Super is the front end. And finally, Tally, which is the form submission abilities, which helps you to capture information if you're looking to do an email newsletter and things like that. Now, what I would say before we begin is this is probably a good idea if you're somebody that's looking to build an MVP concept, or even you have no code skills and you don't want to develop it into something bigger in the future, then this is a good base for you. It's probably good for directory type stuff like this, blogs, and resources like that. But I have some things that didn't work and the reasons why I eventually moved to something a bit better in terms of a system that I will explain near the end of the video in sort of a round off segment. So the basic concept behind this is, as you can see, like I've set up, it was a homepage with a database which had all the tools, and we had sponsorships as well, where I use some of Notion's more advanced features for basically saving a bit of time. So what I initially did was I started structuring the site inside of Notion, because all I had to do was go over to Super. So here is the Super site, and Super is not a free experience. So you can build a free site with Super, but it gives you free hosting using the super.site domain. And you can see the made with Super sticker everywhere, which is even better for even more minimum viable product concept. But you also do have the ability to upgrade to a personal and pro site. I actually ended up doing this near the end of this journey, but naturally it gives you a bit more expansion with connecting custom databases, optimize SEO and stuff, which I'll explain throughout this. So here is what it looks like. This is the pro account, but naturally you'll see pretty much the same view in Super when you've got the free account. But you can see this is what the Notion page turned out like. So basically what you do is you basically build it in Notion, what you think it looks like structurally, and then you go over, and what you can do is, I believe it's in, they changed the navigation completely on this, but you can edit the theme. Now you can apply a certain theme to it, which is perfect for being able to save a bit of time in terms of actually what the site looks like and how it's structured. And it basically allows you to modify details. And here we go, we can see the different themes that I've got here, and change things like the colors, the typography, the layout of pages, and things like that in much more detail. We'll come back to that because that's sort of like a system that I think will be quite helpful. But the one thing that you can do is add some code over the top of it. So one thing that I did was take advantage of the supers templates function. So there are some great templates here that can save you a bit of time in terms of what it actually looks like. So for example, this is a great documentation one, but I think I use this one. So basically what you can do is press get is sent, and it downloads it into your Notion area. And you can basically apply the custom template to the code. So here, I was able to add this CSS to this page, which made it look a bit more structured. And that's a great thing to do when you start, is to look at all of these templates, work out what best suits your structure. In this case, it might be if you're starting a blog. This narrative one is really nice because it feels like a blog and acts like a blog a bit more. And as you can see, you can click in and get things rolling there. But it's worth exploring the templates to see which one's right for you. There's also some paid templates as well, which will save you a bit of time in terms of maybe building custom CSS and things like that. But essentially, I chose, I believe it was the Ascent one, which gave me a bit of like a nice header, a button, and a hero image that I could use. So once that's applied to the super site, it pretty much changes how it looks. So you can see here that whilst it followed a similar structure in Notion, I had to like move stuff based on how that's set up. So once you download that Ascent thing, it'll come up with a mock page and essentially just replace the elements in it. So that is what this page is, just an evolution of that Ascent page. It's really not difficult. There are some great guidance from the super guides that you can find by going to guides here. The actual setup is really easy. I won't go into detail because this video would be stupidly long if I did do that. But it gives you an idea that just using this guide will help you. And just a note, I think they changed it, but you need to add a custom template, you need to be upgraded to the personal plan, which has increased even more since this one. But just to give you an idea of how that works. So this is just some of the basic CSS. It really isn't that difficult. There are some great guides to follow. I am not a codey person. Speak to who's developing the current site, Carl. He will tell you that I am really dumb when it comes to this sort of stuff. But I did a few simple things to make this slightly more more attractive in Notion. Is on the homepage, I created a GIF using Canva with a white background, which allowed me to add a little bit more interactivity. I also used colors to modify the heading, which made it look even more attractive. So I want to show you the database side of this first, because I think this is probably a good way to structure this. So there's a main database that runs this, and it's called Tools All Productivity. And there's about 200 tools in here. And I pretty much hand did this with Charlotte. So we basically completely filled this out to get it going. And essentially what we've done here is very basic in terms of its skills needed to do it. You can change the cover here, which we brought in a cover photo. We added the logo of the tool and the name of the tool. Then we added loads of property fields. And you're probably wondering like, oh, why do we do all this? Well, basically, this is some of the basic metadata that you'll get when you're viewing a tool. So this is a daily planner. This is a summary of a tool. This is the official rating. All of this stuff is so useful when it comes to the future of it, because I can now go into Toolfinder, this old version, and rate and choose the rating and narrow it down. So it helps you to do that. Helps you to find the availability. So you've got to think of how this is all interconnected. And the one thing that we did is actually use relational databases to connect up other tools that were in the database too. So for example, the routine is similar to Sunsama, which will help you to get a better idea for what else is in there and help people link to other tools that are probably relevant. Now, what we did is probably looks really confusing to you, but because this is part of a large database, you can see here that I've got an area called featured. And this is because on the home page, I'm using a linked database, which is essentially the database, original one here, just a version of it. And I've called it featured. So anything with the tick in features gets featured or removed. It should be removed here, but I think it's because here you go. That's why. See, featured, not featured. So you can see that there's some smart little intricacies into doing this. We also had this feature where if you submitted it through Tally, it would go into a submission holding zone. So automatically Tally would tick submission when it was adding a tool so that it wouldn't become live just yet. Then we had our pretty much like our statuses. So anything, if you see here, anything that's live will go in here. If this wasn't live in progress, it wouldn't be able to show. That's just so that content wouldn't appear on the site. We eventually worked that out, but it took a few different setups to do that. So you can get an idea for how this was set up, and really it looks a little bit more intricate, but once you get going with what you want showing on the site, this will be a massive time saver. So this is just an example of the database, but we've got another one down here, which had a few different ones. So top to-do list apps, and this was just a filter of types of tasks, best for personal, and making sure that its submission was unchecked. And even we could have added the live thing. So this is really neat because what you can do is show particular pieces of content. So the way that we did it is properties and then make sure we show certain things. So if we want to show availability, it would show availability. But we just wanted to keep it clean, like a quick summary and a rating. And that's what you see here. Well, you should see, if we go to here, you should see just a quick summary and rating. So to give you an idea of how that worked, it was really simple to do that because all we would go and do is go into the Notion and be like, okay, if we want to add a new filter, we would go here, choose the source, and just narrow it down. So if we, it's called recently added, but let's change the title to top email apps. This is just a mock-up of how it could work. So you want to select type of tool. Here we go. Type of tool. Let's find it. It's down at the bottom here. I think it's because we've already used it. Here we go. Add advanced. But this wouldn't be as complicated. Contains email. Bang. All the email apps come through and the ones that are live as well. So this is great because you can really narrow it down and you can even go to properties and really cull everything that's there and keep just the name or add who it's best for or a summary. So you can really start to refine what it looks like and making sure you press save for everyone because then it becomes live on the site. So let's go and just refresh this because Super's basically your front end. So you're constantly having to just refresh this and see what it looks like. See if you're happy with it. Let's see whether it did bring it in. I remember sometimes Super being a little bit slow with areas in terms of updating. Here we go, top email tools. There we go, we've got it. See, it hasn't really brought it in fully yet, but let's go back to Notion to see if we did anything wrong. No, we haven't. So it should be bringing that in a moment, I think. So just remember that Super is probably going to be about a minute behind, sometimes less, that is from my own experience. But in general, it was a good way to sort of see what's coming up. Let's just see whether it does it. It used to work perfectly fine in terms of updating things like this. I'll explain some of my pain points with it as we go throughout this video. Let's come back to that because we could be here for a little bit of time. But essentially, the one thing that you might need to know about this is it's always live. The site is always live. That's why we had those live filters, because we didn't want to like make things live instantly. But there is in the Pro plan an enable publishing ability, which will save you a bit of time when it comes to making sure that whether you want a big dump on the site of new tools, etc., and it will give you more of an idea of that. So I'm not sure why that's not coming through. A lot of the time, if it's something you notice is not coming through, then it's probably something you're doing wrong. So in this case, it might be freaking out because this one's not here. So I might delete this one and save it for everyone. There we go. So let's see whether that modifies it. But sometimes it's just playing around with it and seeing what stops things, and you do get used to and work out what actually stops, what interrupts the flow of uploading something to the site. So one of the pain points that I had when I was starting out was the pages. The pages are all hosted in here, so you can see these are all of the tools that we have in Toolfinder, and you can open this up and see some more. But one thing that we found was that, like, you can have areas within areas. So when we're starting out, you need to make sure you have a structure to this, because it can really go south. Like, for example, these are all the best productivity tool lists that we had. And God, it was a bit of a nightmare originally when we started all of these out. And then it basically started like crashing in on us because we had pages within pages within pages. So just making sure that you've got some structure to your account will really, really help you. So this is a good example of, so let's go to best to-do list apps for students. We wrote this list, and basically what you can do is pull in a database of essentially any tool that's in there, but you can narrow it down to whatever filters you want. And it's just a linked database. So if we go and find it for students, so here we go, best note-taking tools for students. I think that's the same one. You can basically filter this down and have it so that it contains, I don't think we actually finished this one, notes, and you can even filter it down who it's best for, students. Bang. So you get the idea behind the setup of all of these meta tags, because it helps you to basically create this interweaving relationship between them. Now, one thing we did do is do more relational stuff. So for example, this one, the category it got featured in, like OneNote got featured in, top note-taking apps for 2023. And one thing we did do is, which I'll show you in a moment, is set up these database templates, which helps us write pieces on each of them. So if I wanted to go back to, here we go into a tool and pop this open. Let's go into Notion. And I wanted to create a brand new tool. I could go new tool name. And here we go. I could basically fill all of this out. And you can have a structure in here. We had an initial structure where it would bring in the ad, which I'll show you in a moment. It would have, what is this tool? And it would change the structure of it based on the name of the tool. So as you were typing it in, like, okay, Evernote, it would go, what is Evernote? You could also generate a short summary on it, which didn't always work because AI is not great, and start listing all of the resources and stuff down here. We also have an alternatives area here. So this saved a lot of time when it came to building new pages, because you simply just created a new tool and start filling it out. And this worked well initially, but obviously this is why we moved to the new site, because it just became a little bit more tedious when setting things up in the long term with SEO, and with things I'll talk about near the end. So this is great because you can start connecting it to things. Like, for example, we had certain things that was like coming soon, which would categorize it as a coming soon app. We could link the video, etc. And you can do all of the good stuff that you can in Notion, like video, and start linking video in there to make the content even more, even stronger. So I want to take you to this one. So this is our advertising, and this is really neat. Because we have Spike as a sponsor. And as you can see, it gives a little bit of an outline. This is basically a little button that we created, just an expanded version of the card I think it's called the card callout. I think this is an expanded version of card callout. We basically copied it from the Ascent template that you copy from your super into your Notion to get things going. And it worked great. And you can see here it's on 240 other pages. Wow. Because we're doing a very simple thing in utilizing Notion sync blocks. So I can copy and paste this sync anywhere. And we did it inside of a database template, which means once it's in there, every time you create it, it will only keep updated with whatever the main homepage ad is. So this is the original one here. And you can see it's the original here because it's this. But basically when this updated, all of the other pages updated, which made life pretty cool. So let me show you how it works. So if I said spike A, bang, spike B, it gives a real-time update to it. When you're doing that site-wide, it gives you a better idea of how to basically scale something to make it a lot easier instead of micro-adding the ads in every single time. So all you have to do to that is copy and paste, and it just keeps the same version updated. So you can get an idea of how that works. Then we linked it to the product page, and there we go. Gave you an idea about it. Spike sponsored by Spike. But this is how we did ads, and it worked super well because you could scale it across all of the site, 240 pages, which was perfect. So that was just a short overview of the ads. When it came to the general structure of the email newsletter, we basically imported this through some pasted code, embed code, through TALLY. And essentially, with TALLY, it's a no-code setup. So you can basically get these so that whenever somebody types their email, it will store it in TALLY, and then it allows you to move it to the application you're using for newsletters. So this is great for an MVP because you can actually have this pop up on screen as well. And that's what we initially had at the start. It popped up on screen, allowed you to get going with that. So TALLY worked really great for that. And you can see here that it really was just a block that you can keep updated as well. Let me show you what it looks like in TALLY. So here we go. I think it's join the newsletter here, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is very simply the setup, and I put it as a required, and you can add any other field if you want, read the privacy policy, and then once you're good to go, you basically paste it into Notion, and it pretty much does it for you. So you can have it as a full page, which we have, or you can have it as a pop-up, and you can really modify what the pop-up shows. Like, okay, whether it's on button click or page load, how wide it is, and you can really modify it where it's on the Pro account as well. So you can get the code and just copy it into Notion. And what you actually need for some of it is this script in the CSS. I'm acting like I'm very smart here, but it's just in the code. And here we go. So we had a Google tag for Google Analytics, but here you can see all of the TALLY configuration. So that will pop up when you're viewing the site. Perfect for, and here we go. The old site redirects to a 404 page because it's no longer existing. So TALLY was really great for that because we were able to start capturing newsletter items, people in the newsletter quite easily, quite fast, which was one of my worries when I started this out. So just to give you a few other things, the SEO has changed a bit. Like you can modify the page SEO, and you can disable indexing and see what the social preview's like. Here's one of my bugbears with Super. The SEO wasn't great. It didn't allow you to give a massive amount of page improvements. I've learned a lot about SEO in the last month from working on the new site with Carl. And to be honest, Super isn't that good at it, even though it markets itself as it. It does a good job, but not a great job. And when you're building something on scale, probably you want to go with a good SEO, great SEO versus just good SEO. Let me show you around here. There is some great customizations in Super. For example, you can have page properties show or not. You can add database views, to be able to be disabled. So that's great for the home page because you can have this show or not. Here, they go like that. So you can really customize it. You can enable site search or not, see it pop away there. And you can modify things like that. You can really go into the nav bar, like how small certain things are, how big they are. You can modify the call to action, which if you want it, you can have it. You can change the minimalism of the sidebar as well. There's loads you can do with design too. So when I edit this theme, I can go in and I can really make it look better with dark modes, what the typography looks like, make the baseline text bigger, all of the details there. The layouts, even small stuff like column width, column gaps, etc., whether they have rounded edges or not, just slightly rounded edges, and whether the page link shows, etc. You could even modify the blocks, the databases, and navigation as well. So there's some great stuff when it comes to really setting up your site in a bit more detail. So other stuff, you can manage your domain from here in settings. There are some great ways to just modify the favicon and things like that. Footer, which was our footer down here. You can set things up with links and different things like that. And let me think of some additional stuff. So if you're doing the SEO for, say, this page, you can go and edit SEO details, which gives you the ability to add a description, images, and modify that. You can also see it in Notion, set a password, and do code CSS to each page if you want to. But as you can see, we did those interweaving links, which definitely helped things get going. So I'm trying to think of other things that might be helpful. There's a mobile viewer, which was helpful to be able to see what it actually looked like on mobile. And you can see what it looks like on full screen. Other aspects of this were really just getting used to the site. The reasons why we moved from something like this is mainly SEO, scalability, and more features. I think there are some great options in here like ads. Didn't think I was able to do that, but Notion saved a big job and Super saved a big job when doing synced blocks. Scalability with filters and things like that was helpful, but nowhere near what we could get in the future. But there's just general formatting, structure of site. And obviously, I think if you were good at design and CSS, I think you could do a far greater job than I did. But just it really was to get the launch out versus actually do it. I did think I would spend a lot longer on Super. I actually paid for the yearly pricing in February, thinking that I'd needed to save money in the long term, so maybe get the pricing. But actually, I didn't think I'd move this early because I thought, okay, I've built an MVP. Let's just see whether it has legs for about a year. And then Carl was like, yeah, we need to really structure this much better. And we moved to something called Contentful, which actually is really amazing to use in terms of building and scaling this project. So if you're interested in checking out Toolfinder, you can go and discover it in the link in description. But this was the old Toolfinder and how we built it with Super, Notion, and Tally. Hopefully it's found this video helpful in getting an understanding of building an MVP using these no-code tools. But of course, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Thank you very much, folks. And do check out the all-new Toolfinder, linked in the description below. You'll definitely see a noticeable difference. Thank you very much, folks, and I'll see you soon.